Recording. All right. So first question is, can you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where'd you go to school, things like that.
Absolutely. My name is Dr. Kylie Sylvester. Most people in the Statesboro community know me as Dr. Kai. I'm a pediatric physical therapist at the Therapy Spot right here in town. I've been here at the Therapy Spot for around 2 years now. I am not originally from here. I'm still getting to know the area even after 2 years now. I'm originally from Florida. I did all of my schooling in Florida. I went to University of South Florida for my undergraduate degree, did my bachelor's in health sciences. So I had a pretty general foundation going into PT school, and then did my doctorate in physical therapy at Florida Gulf Coast University, which is down in Fort Myers. If you've ever heard of Cape Coral, which is like the retirement capital of the US, that was right in my backyard. Ended up going into pediatrics. I've always been interested in pediatrics. I started out working with Special Olympics, and that kind of snowballed into my career. I now work as a pediatric physical therapist full time. I am also a adjunct faculty over at Georgia Southern University. I work with the exercise science students in the Super Eagles and Camp Rad programs, which is an adaptive fitness program that's offered through one of the courses. What else do I do? There's a lot.
Sounds like
I
you
also
do a lot
work
of
with
stuff.
I work with a nonprofit organization called Ambux that designs adaptive tricycles for kids that can't ride a normal bike.
Cool.
I'm sure there's probably other stuff, but there, I guess that gives
Yes,
you the
ma'am.
basics.
Yeah. So can you elaborate on what a PT does, generally speaking?
Just a physical therapist in general.
Yeah, just in general.
Yeah, so a PT, we focus on gross motor function. So typically, when we're talking about physical abilities, we break it into gross motor and fine motor. So gross is in the medical world meaning big. So running, jumping, crawling, walking, big motor movements. So my day, the big sections that I work on, I'm looking at balance, I'm looking at strength, agility, and a little bit of everything in between, coordination, and really advancing that for my kids. What that looks like in a day to day can vary quite significantly depending on who you're talking about. As a pediatric therapist, I work with kids 0 to 21. So I could be working with a kid that's 2 days old. I could be working with a kid in their 20s, which can obviously look very different depending on where they're at on the spectrum. The other thing that I kind of touched on is fine motor movement. You'll see a little bit of that depending on where you're at in PT, but for the most part, that's kind of OT's genre, occupational therapy. So fine motor looks at things like handwriting and smaller hand movements and little things. So we kind of do the big stuff.
Big stuff. Okay, well, that's cool. Do you prefer working with younger clients or older clients?
I've always had a heart with kids. I've been working with kids for as long as I can remember. Growing up, I babysat as soon as they could legally let me. Um, I've always had a heart for working with children. I have worked with older populations in certain settings. As a general rule, I don't work a whole lot on the more orthopedic side of things. So, say if you were to work at like an Optum or a Benchmark, where you're seeing knee replacements and ankle injuries, I don't do a whole lot of that, just because I get bored. Squats are kind of boring to me.
Yeah, I understand. I don't. I'm not a big fan of leg day.
Where yeah, but for me, I feel like with the pediatric side of things, especially, you get to be a lot more creative. So a lot of my day is not just exercise, but how do you take that exercise and adapt it and twist it so that it's fun and engaging for a 4-year-old. So it works some more creative side of my brain. I come from a creative background outside of my fitness background. I have a background in theater. I know most people think that's shocking, ironically, um, kind of out there. But when I did work in the adult populations, I actually worked on Broadway. So I have a background doing physical therapy for theater performers, and anyone in the theater world. So I've also dabbled in that a little bit as well.
My mom liked doing theater when she was in high school, and she's also a speech therapist. That's all she knows, Carolina as
It's
well.
a it's a niche side of the world for sure. The one of the big things that got me into the physical therapy world specifically, was the variety within your job. There are physical therapists that work with kids like me. There are physical therapists that work with animals like horses or dogs, or that corgi that broke its leg falling off the couch. Or there are therapists that work in pelvic floor and work with women that have gone through childbirth. There are therapists that work with strokes on the neurological side of things. Physical therapy as a career, um most people think of the orthopedic side, grandpa with a hip replacement, but there's so much depth to PT.
Now you were
You can
talking
really
of,
do anything.
oh, sorry to interrupt, but you were talking about working mainly with kids. How have you adapted some of the, I don't know, some of the stuff that you've done in like in your clinical setting to work more with like the younger population?
Yeah, so um it's all about games, right? Because kids play. That's what they do, right? That's how kids learn about the world, is through play. So one of my favorite exercises that I do with my kids, is actually one that I invented. It's not copyrighted or anything. You can gladly steal it from me. But most people know that it comes from me. Is reverse cornhole. So I take a traditional cornhole board, but instead of throwing with your arms, we throw with our feet in my clinic. So my kids will actually use their feet to smush a beanbag in between their feet and use their legs to throw it into the cornhole board. So it works on core strengthening, works on leg strengthening, coordination. And for a lot of my kids that have ankle instability and issues as well, it's really targeting that ankle work. So the beauty of doing games and what I do is I do a lot of compound movements that work on a lot of different muscle groups at one time, so I can get more bang for my buck. Because the other beauty of working with children is they have short attention spans.
Yeah.
They don't always want to do 3 sets of 10. So if I can work on multiple things at one time, I'm getting more bang for my buck and I'm going to get better results with my interventions with my kids. So that's kind of one example, I guess, of how that might look. That's with older kids. If we're talking younger kids, because I work with babies as well. So sometimes it's dangling a rattle to get them to reach for something or look a certain way, or positioning them on a yoga ball or on a certain mat so that I can get them to turn and look and reach and move about the world. So there's all sorts of different ways that I can kind of twist and get what I need by using games to kind of trick kids into physical mobility.
Yeah, that's cool. My mom, she always likes using little people when she's working with the younger kids. 'Cause she's, like I said, she's a speech pathologist. She helps with like swallowing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did you always know that you wanted to be a PT, or was there something else you were interested in going through college?
I I was pretty stuck on PT. I so how I got into PT, I guess, is where that kind of question goes. So growing up, my neighbor has cerebral palsy. He's been my friend since diapers. He still lives next to my childhood home when I go to visit. My friend Dale, he's now in his late 20s. We've grown up together. He's like a brother to me. But he has pretty severe cerebral palsy. He can walk. It's not pretty, but he can do it. But I've grown up with him. So I've grown up around kids with disabilities. A lot of the perceptions that people grow up with towards disabilities, none of that. I didn't have that. Like, viewing kids as the other kid on the special side of the school, on the special classroom. To me, Dale wasn't special. He was Dale. When people asked to tie his shoes, I was like, no, he can tie his own freaking shoes. Leave him alone. If he wants help, he'll ask you. Like, you know, so for me, even in childhood, I developed this sense of advocacy and passion towards helping people that were treated like crap by my classmates and pushed around as the special kid in the special class on the special side of school. And I always thought that was stupid because I'm like, he's fine. I grew up accepting people for the way that they are. I didn't view them as other and different. And, I take everybody for how they are. And I later got into Special Olympics, which is an adaptive exercise program for kids with disabilities. And a lot of the directors, by the time I was 16, 17, I was a volunteer coordinator for volunteers 3 times my age. And I was bossing around people in their 60s, telling them which bowling lane to go to work with which kid. So I just had a knack for it from a young age. And my directors were all like, you should do this for a living. And it was either they had suggested that I either go into like special education teaching or go into the therapy world. And it was at a time when most of the teachers that I knew had second jobs working at Publix. And I really wanted my parents to retire one day and I wanted to help them get there. So I was like, not doing that. Like, I don't want to have to work a second job if I'm going through all this work to go to school for it. So I started looking into rehab and I ended up shadowing with a pediatric physical therapist. And after about 20 minutes, I looked over at the therapist and went, okay, where do I sign? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm doing this for the rest of my life. And that was at 15 or 16 years old. And I never looked back.
I've struggled in college trying to figure out what I want to do because I played sports in high school, so I thought I always wanted to be a coach. And then I figured out they don't make a lot of money, and half the time they're struggling.
Honestly, the biggest thing that I could suggest is shadowing. Getting in the field and physically doing it, and seeing it was that moment that clicked for me. Because not on the sports side, I grew up on the theater side. And my family told me, girl, you ain't no Idina Menzel, you're not going on Broadway. It's not going to happen. We're not paying for you to get a theater major. So don't waste your damn time. And so I had that moment where I was looking around and had nowhere to go. And then Dale looked at me and I went to a Special Olympics event and here I am.
It just kind of fell into place. So
it's like I take lots of students. I've loved teaching, and one of the biggest reasons why I teach is because, and it's I'll admit it's kind of selfish, but I love helping my students have that aha moment of having that moment where they go, Dr. Kai, I know what I want to do for the rest of my life because of you. You helped me realize I want to do this. And I went, well, that's good, kid. Thanks.
yeah, well,
that moment is why I teach. Because I help students have that. So if you ever want to come shadow me, feel free to come hang out with me for a day, even if you have a sports or orthopedic background. I have one of my students right now. He's a basketball kid. He always has looked into orthopedics, always thought he was going to work with athletes his whole life. And even this 6 foot tall, large African-American dude gets on the 4th floor with my 3-year-olds and plays basketball with them. And he loves every moment of it. And it's really helped him ensure, figuring out what he wants to do. And so I encourage people like I've always kind of said, you don't knock it till you try it. And the beauty of shadowing in a pediatric setting, especially, is in most pediatric settings, it's not just one discipline. So as you've probably seen with your mom, most clinics have speech and PT and OT. Sometimes even ABA or play therapy. So a lot of my shadowing students, they hop up and down the hallway. They spend a half hour with me. Oh, hey, Dr. Kyle, see you later. They go hang out with some of the other therapists. So you get to kind of test out a couple different careers at once and kind of see if, what feels right. I mean, one of my students that shadows with me, He loves me to pieces, but he's like, yeah, I want to do OT. I don't want you. I'm like, that's fine. You do you. And I'm not for everybody, but you're not gonna know till you try. But by shadowing, I mean, figuring out what you want to do for the rest of your life is a big decision,
Yes.
especially if you're gonna go the next step to do, a graduate level degree, right?
Or
It's
get
a
a
lot of money,
doctorate
it's a
or
lot of freaking
whatever
time.
else.
So if you want to know that, like, you want to test the car before you buy it
Yes.
and commit to driving that car for the next 10 years.
At least 10 years.
Did I lose
Oh,
you? Oh goodness, you
no,
might
I'm
have
still
poor
here.
internet.
I can still hear you. You good? Uh-oh.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes, the recording started again. We had a quick internet timeout.
Oh, I love Wi-Fi.
Where do you see the future of PT going? It seems like every career is evolving in some shape or form. So where do you see it going?
PT is definitely going to be an interesting one. I definitely see PT school changing within the next 5 to 10 years. So if you're talking in the world of PT school now, say you wanted to go into PT, right? You get your bachelor's and then you apply for grad school, and then your typical PT school is about 3 years. Some are 3 and a little bit of change, some are a little bit less than 3. Kind of just depends on where you go. But it's about 3 years. Here's the thing. In the past 10 years or so, we have advocated for what's called direct access, which for us as physical therapists has made our jobs a lot easier. In the sense of, in the past, we were very much a specialist. So, in order to see a specialist, you have to go to your doctor and say, hey, I want to go to this person. Just like you would go to your eye doctor or an endocrinologist or a neurologist, right? Specialist. We were the same way, where you had to go, hey, doc, my knee hurts. I need to go to PT. Yeah. Well, with direct access, you can skip that step. You don't need to waste your time going to the doctors and telling them your knee hurts and them going, hey, you need PT. You can go, yeah, no, I know that. You can just go straight to the PT.
Doesn't that aid in like people starting private practices and stuff like that?
To some extent, yes. So the problem with direct access is, with that comes a little asterisk, because the whole reason why you typically go to the doctor first is so they can make sure that, say, your shoulder pain, right? You come in and say, hey, my shoulder hurts. I hurt my shoulder playing baseball. Well, if you go to the doctor first, the doctor can go, hey, I know that your shoulder pain is actually you having a heart attack. You need to go to the hospital. Your doctor's qualified to tell you that. Well, if you were to go straight to PT, now I also need to study heart attacks and make sure that your shoulder's not you having a heart attack. So that means extra schooling for me and extra things that I have to know, because I need to be able to screen for those red flags the moment you walk in the door, because I don't know if you saw your doctor before or not. I mean, hopefully I got the paperwork sent over. But if I didn't, or if it is a situation of direct access, I got to be prepared for that so that you don't die on my floor. Because that would suck.
Yeah, that would suck.
That would suck. So, with that, that's why we're a doctorate level profession now, right? That's why I have doctor in front of my name, because I need to know doctor level information. The problem is, we've now crammed all of that in addition to everything I need to know as a PT. And PTs right now, we graduate with a general degree. So I can walk off that stage and I could go into neuro, I could go into peds, I could go into geriatrics, I could go into ortho, right? Because we learn a little bit of everything. Well, the problem with knowing a little bit of everything is you're a jack of all trades. You're a master of none. So just like your general doctor, your general physician, they're not a neurologist. They're not perfect in neuro. They remember a couple from that class they took 10 years ago, but they ain't perfect. I think PT is going in the same direction. Because with right now, as a PT, we can specialize and do that extra schooling, but we don't have to. It's an option. Like I could get a specialist in pediatrics,
Make a little bit more money.
make a little more money, get a little bit extra paperwork, have an extra number, a letter behind my name, but I don't have to. I think in the future, because there's so much knowledge we have to learn, I think we're going to have to. It's going to be like going to med school where you all start at the same and then you split off. And then you go, okay, I'm going peds. Okay, I'm going cardio. Okay, I'm going neuro. Okay, I'm going here. The way we do it right now is you try to do a clinical where you want to go. So when we get to our point of clinical rotations, I knew I wanted to work with kids. So I made sure one of my clinical rotations was with kids so that I could train under a pediatric therapist and get more than just what I get in class. But you technically don't have to have a clinical in peds to work in peds. It's not a requirement. But I think there's going to be more the short stories. I think there's going to be more specialization within the schooling process and within the career as a whole moving forward, just because there's so much knowledge that we just simply can't fit into 3 years. Either that or they're going to make PT school longer and make it, 4 years or 5 because there's just not enough time.
Yeah. Well, that sounds interesting. My mom always talks about how like speech is changing and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. She doesn't go into specifics with me because I don't remember all the speech analogies and stuff that she uses, but I get the gist of it.
Oh
But
yeah. Well, and careers, I think that's happening across the board, honestly, because the medical community is growing, right? And as human beings, our brains can only hold so much knowledge.
yes, that's true.
Cannot know everything. So you kind of have to specialize and kind of decide, okay, I'm going to centralize my brain in this genre because it's getting too big. You can't hold it all. We're only human.
Are there any certifications you need or recommend in addition to going to school to be a PT?
Well, it depends on where you go in PT, there's all sorts of different certifications just depending on what you do. I personally just did one. I got certified in what's called DMI, actually just a couple weeks ago. And I would recommend DMI certifications for anyone that goes into pediatric PT now. I love it. It's incredibly effective with my kids. But I'm right now one of only 600 PTs in the entire world and only 8 in the state of Georgia certified in DMI. It's super cool, super fun. Highly recommend it.
What is
But
DMI?
dynamic movement intervention. It's super fun. You can look it up. But basically, it's an intensive form of therapy for pediatrics. But it's really changed the game and how we think and look at kids. And it's just really fun stuff. It really makes your brain hurt, but I like that. But if you were to go into orthopedic or even some other settings, like DMI is kind of useless to you. So, it really depends on what type of PT you go into. Like there's a lot of, certain equipments that I work with. There's certain therapies that I do as a pediatric therapist that may be irrelevant to other therapists. But in my world, it's like, top tier. If you're certified in this, you're gold. You made it.
What's your typical day look like? Like from when you wake up to, I don't know, I guess when you get off of work.
So I'm one of our only pediatric physical therapists in our whole county. Right now there's me and I have one more PT in my clinic, but she's leaving us at the end of the month. So realistically, I'm pretty much the only one in my practice. And we have one other PT that works in another clinic on the other side of town. And we're pretty much it for Bullitt County. And I have kids that come from several other counties to get to me because there's not a lot of pediatric practices around us right now. So there's a lot of need and just not enough therapists. So my day is very busy. I work 8 to 5:30 most days, except for my days when I teach, because I do like to take some time off to teach. I typically get up around 6, gotta, do your daily routine, getting ready for the day,
Get your breakfast, all
take
that
care
good
of my
stuff.
dog. Oh yeah, and get off to work. I am an early bird. I always get to the office early, but that's because I like to prep all my toys and get ready for all my kids. And I do a lot of nonprofit work, so a lot of times that early morning moment to myself is when I'm catching up on all of my nonprofit work and organizing fundraisers and bike giveaways, and working with some of my families that need that extra help beyond what my 8 to 5:30 can handle. My typical day, we'll take today for example. My youngest kid I worked with was 4 months old today. My oldest kid I worked with today was about 10. And I saw everything in between. Today was my first day using DMI in the clinic, so it was a lot of educating families on my new intensive programs that I'm doing with my kids, and trying out a lot of my new techniques. I also take shadowing students, so anytime I get a break in my day, I'm teaching my students new things, kind of, teaching them along the way, getting them involved. I'm very big with my students on having them involved in my interventions. My kids love my students. Um, and working with families. Uh, have a lunch break halfway through the day. I'm catching up on paperwork and eating what I can and helping out families and getting home, and I catch up on whatever paperwork I didn't get to finish because I don't like leaving paperwork. So I always try to get it done on the same day.
Really, I'm the
Some
same
people
way.
the next morning. I just want to get it over with.
Yeah.
What I have to
Next day you
say.
start off
Um,
fresh and new and don't have to worry about anything.
and then getting to unwind and get ready for the next day tomorrow. But every day looks a little different just depending on what kind of caseload you have. Some of my kids are hour-long sessions, some of them are half hours. So some days go by really quick, and some days you kind of get to take your time. And sometimes it's a little mixture of the two. But my favorite part about my job is that no day looks the same. You never know what you're walking into. Some days your kids are in a great mood, some days they're screaming their heads off. And I'm a firm believer in controlled chaos. My life is controlled chaos, and everything that I do is controlled chaos. And you're typically finding me running down the hallway on a scooter board, chasing after children, biking around the parking lot, chasing kids in wheelchairs through the parking lot, and everything in between.
All right. Well, last question for you because I'm about to run out of time because I don't have the
Totally fine.
Zoom Pro. You could have one job besides the one you're in now, regardless of schooling, opportunity, how much money you'd make. What would it be? You can do anything.
Um, Probably something in like the advocacy world. Politicians irritate me, and a lot of them are really stupid and make stupid decisions that hurt my children. And I tell every family that walks through my door, you walk through my door and I adopt your child. And I treat every kid that walks through my door like they're one of my own. And I joke that I'm a mom of 80, and that's probably why my partner hasn't let me have kids yet. um, but with that being said, seeing a lot of the social injustices and the political issues that have, whether it's insurance companies or, political agendas that have really ruined the lives of my kids or stunted their ability to grow and live their lives. I would be the one screaming and picketing and rioting, and beating those politicians over the head until they listen and help my babies, because I love my kids too much. And but I literally just don't have enough time in the day to do it all right now. It would have to be a completely different job. I just simply do not have enough time to sit on hold with these politicians. There's not enough time.
Well, I was just saying, like, instead of doing PT, you can do whatever you want, but that works. Well,
Oh yeah, that'd be what I'd be doing. I'd be screaming on Capitol Hill.
thank you for meeting with me, especially after a long day at work, probably, and it's a Monday. But
No worries. I had the time to squeeze it in, so I was like, oh, make it work.
yes, man, this helps me out. This is 50% of my grade or something like that.
Well, and if you do want to shadow, whether it's in this setting or whether it's in other settings, the beauty of shadowing is it really can help kind of make that click. And the best thing I can recommend is, you walk into a clinic, you show up looking professional like you are, and hey, I want to learn from y'all. I want to see if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And if you show up looking the part and acting the part, the worst they could do is say no and then you try another clinic. But you can go from there and really, you're gonna make a cameo. Come on. Come on. But that's the best thing you could do. And even if it's just for a day, I mean, that was where I started, is I literally just went over for an afternoon, just to see it. I know when I was looking into school, I got in anywhere I could. I went to veterans hospitals. I went to regular hospitals. I worked in the NICU. I've seen a little bit of everything. Child, my shoulder is not a chew toy. Um, but I saw a little bit of everything, so that I could really effectively make that decision. You go back to the car analogy of looking at a car and making sure that's the one you want to get. I did the equivalent of going to every damn dealership in town, because I wanted to make sure that if I was about to blow, $60,000 on grad school, that was gonna be worth
That's
it.
what you. Yeah. Well,
And you're not gonna know till you see it.
I'm gonna stop the recording.